I am an American. I believe in freedom of expression for all. Except for people I don't like. But if that were the case, then I would not have been able to make half the book reviews on this channel. So I guess that's okay. Kind of. In all seriousness, have you ever read a book and thought, how the hell was that guy allowed to publish? Some law or deity ought to have interfered. Sometimes it's bitter tripe that was written by someone so clearly angry at the world. Other times it's prose that's so catastrophically stupid it makes used toilet paper look like a magnum opus. There's no shortage of dumb books out there. But perhaps the crown jewel of literary dumbness comes not from a self-published author on Amazon in the 2020s. Rather, all the way back in 1800s America. On January 22nd, 1747, a child named Timothy Dexter was born in Massachusetts. Dropping out of school at age 8 to work on a farm, he would later marry a rich widow named Elizabeth Frothingham and use the inherited capital to start a business. And boy, did business boom with this man. Due to his lack of education, Dexter was gullible and uninformed on trade affairs. Rivals, in an attempt to humiliate him, advised him to go and sell bed warmers in the sweltering West Indies. So he did. Only for local molasses factories to buy the bed warmers and use them as ladles. Similar fortuitous incidents would transpire across the Caribbean. Mittens exported to, again, the West Indies, were bought and sold by Asian traders en route to Siberia. Baleen he accidentally acquired was later sold as corset pieces, and a massive shipment of coal to Newcastle, England, a town notable for its coal industry, arrived smack in the middle of a miners' strike, so the influx of foreign coal was greatly appreciated. As his would-be saboteurs watched with dismay, Dexter rose in popularity and wealth. The difference between him and other successful businessmen, however, is that Dexter had no idea how lucky he was. Much of these high-profile sales only happened due to good timing or the improvisation of third parties. But Dexter did the obvious thing, completely discount the possibility of coincidence, and declare himself an entrepreneurial genius. And with that came his more contentious quirks. As his wealth grew and his ego inflated, Dexter would deck out his home with statues of history's most famous men: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Napoleon Bonaparte, and Timothy Dexter. He adopted the title of Lord and paid people who addressed him as such, and at one point faked his own death and orchestrated a funeral with 3,000 attendees. To their surprise, he would emerge very much alive and beat up his wife in front of them because she wasn't sad enough during the service. He previously alleged that his wife had died years ago and was actually a ghost. So the fact that his cane did not pass through her flesh makes him a liar. For shame. In all seriousness, his eccentricities definitely revealed a darker side, and despite his wealth, he was never as well respected as he thought he was. When he died in 1806, he was not consigned to the lavish mahogany coffin he had used for his fake funeral. Instead, he was buried in a communal graveyard, like any common man. Still, it was remarked upon his death, "We ne'er shall look upon his like again." The number of ways you could read that could fill a book. And book is an apt term, because perhaps Dexter's most notorious contribution was an autobiographical collection of essays published in 1802, entitled A Pickle for the Knowing Ones. If you gave a chimpanzee a typewriter and also alcoholism and a stroke, you'd get A Pickle for the Knowing Ones, a presumptuous yet incoherent commentary on the state of things, with terrible spelling and almost no punctuation. The latter criticism was addressed by Dexter in a second edition, where he filled a page with punctuation marks and advised the reader to pepper and salt it as they please. I'd rather load them in a pellet gun and shoot myself in the foot than read this dumbass book. Regardless, the manuscript remains a piece of historical significance and curiosity, and we're gonna try and read through it. Keyword, try. I'm not kidding when I say this book is incomprehensible. I'd read the first line, but the first period doesn't appear until 898 words in, so instead I'm just gonna read it until my head starts to hurt. To mankind at large, the time is come at last, the great day of rejoicing. What is that? Why, I will tell you, thous 3 kings is raised you mean, should no raise on the first royal arch in the world, almost not quite, but very hew up upon, so they are good mark to the scene, so the women's lick to see the frownt, and all people loves to see them, as the Quakers will come, and peep slyly, and feel glad, and say how the dull friend father— No! Guys, this may be the first shitpost in American history. All you quote-unquote seasoned trolls out there, y'all could learn something from Lord Timothy Dexter. So this first section is basically a glorified description of his house. He begins by detailing the various statues in his property, referring to great American historical figures as kings, such as John Adams and Jorge Washington. He also has marble lions and a lamb and an eagle, and something he hilariously calls the Temple of Reason. Maybe the temple got sacked, I don't know. What's funny about this text is that if you ignore the spelling and read through it phonetically, you can kinda sorta understand it. For example, I may be dead wrong, but I'm gonna try and translate this. In his so-called Garden of Reason, there is a coffin with green trimmings on the outside, kept under lock and key, which holds pipes and tobacco, a speaking trumpet, and a Bible. Based on the context, we can infer this is the aforementioned coffin he had at his fake funeral, and the various personal objects he wishes to be buried with. Or maybe that's just horseshit, I don't know. He then muses on what a president is and should be. According to him, a president is a king who has all the power he wants, but who must also make the people happy. There is so much I could say right now, but this video's threatened to lose the plot about 3 times already, so let's just move on. I think in this next section, he's ranting about people who went to college. All of a sudden, this guy's based. He seems to speak highly of farmers, which makes sense due to his background, and then contrasts them with academics who promise to pay but never pay, and think very strongly of themselves, but are really just fellow countrymen like the rest of us. They pretended to be Freemasons, but are to the country. Forgive me for guessing. Well, forgive me if I can't understand what the hell you're talking about. He then recounts how his son-in-law, Abraham, whom he dubs Divil throughout the text, hired a lawyer to beat him up because Abraham was angry that people kept referring to him as Lord Timothy Dexter. Dexter allegedly got knocked on the head 4 different times. This guy attracts blows to the head like mold on a shower curtain. It is then we get Dexter's most profound musing in the book so far. Man is the best animal, and the worst. All men are more or less the devil, but some are half or 3/4 beast, such as dogs, horses, cats, lions, owls, monkeys, wild cats, lambs, doves, hogs, oxen, snakes. I see God in all places, the God of nature, and all things we live and move in. It's actually kind of beautiful. Despite seeing the worst in mankind, he is capable of seeing the best in them too. In all things. By the grace of God. Then this is followed by him calling priests money-grubbing hypocrites. This book has the energy of a man who just can't anymore. All his indignation at the world boiled over and he just had to express himself or else it would have killed him. Even if it does read like a Mad Lib where you suggest letters instead of words. I love how he vents to a so-called Mr. Printer, which is presumably his publisher, as if the process of writing a book is akin to addressing a pen pal. Remember, this is a guy writing in the early 19th century. This isn't some terminally online schizo poster in the current year. Even in the 1800s, we had self-insert fanfiction that rivaled the likes of My Immortal. I'm the first Lord of the United States of America. It is the voice of the people and I can't help it, so let it go. Oh my lord. I have never seen someone so detached from and yet so in tune with the human condition. Like, don't we all wish we could be the voice of the people and just tell our critics to let it go? Don't we wish we could be so bluntly resilient against our naysayers to call out their hypocrisy for laughing at us when they wouldn't laugh at God or their betters? From the threshold of our own dedicated museum? I take it back. Let this man express himself. Let him add a new canon book to the Bible for all I care. Finally, we get actual readable text. This is a grievance that Dexter submitted to the Impartial Herald, the local newspaper of Newburyport, Massachusetts, which must have had someone interpret and edit his original prose. He complains how despite spending $800 a year on a neighborhood watch, delinquents still break windows and fences around town. He accuses the night watch of being lazy or scared, and delivers a scathing rebuke. Boast not of it if you call this liberty and equality. Straight bars. In an unrelated piece, also with an interpreter, he compares the world to a very large creature with its various landmarks and organisms, different parts of its body, how mankind is simultaneously the greatest and worst creature on Earth, and how the destructive power of the apocalypse will be comparable to 900 million tons of the best of good powder. Wow, Timothy. That's a big number. Your philosophical musings are surpassed only by your numeric prowess. Although I honestly think he chose 900 million because he doesn't know what a billion is. He concludes this spiel by calling out people who wouldn't believe him, yet believe equally ridiculous things. We've got religious satire in this book about pickles and privileged collegegoers. Speaking of which, a brief aside about the title. The word pickle here is used in the informal sense, as in a problem or a conundrum. Think The Sandlot.
And he got me out of the biggest pickle I'd ever be in.
The knowing ones are the aforementioned intellectuals that Dexter despises. So this book, which is basically Dexter's manifesto for all things, is a sticky situation for the intellectuals, as it calls out and challenges their worldviews. Supposedly. Anyway, back to it. We then get this. How great the soul is. Do not you all wonder and admire to see and behold and hear? Can you all believe half the truth and admire to hear the wonders how great the soul is? Only behold, past finding out. Only see how large the soul is. That if a man is drowned in the sea, what a great bubble comes up out of the top of the water. The last of the man dying under water. This is wind, is the soul that is the last to ascend out of the deep to glory. It is the breath from on high doth go on high to glory. The bubble is the soul, a young fellow's for gunning for the good of bodies and souls. Yep. Souls are bubbles.
Fucking bubbles!
Oh great, we're back to the nonsense. Here he complains about his wife. I was married to the ghost 35 years since last May. I have been in hell all the time more since. I'm glad he's dedicating a significant portion of the text to what's important. Remember when Dexter alleged his wife was a ghost? Well, now we know where that came from. She is so lifeless and cruel that she must have died years ago and become a shade of her former self. We can count the scars on his head given by the ghost and others. Amen. Why do people keep hitting him on the head? It's making his writing worse each time. Stop. If I had not the ghost in my house, I would give light to my brothers and sisters and have peace all over the world. Jesus, dude. Why don't you tell us how you really feel? The world without the ghost of Elizabeth Frothingham. He then takes a break from bashing his wife to note how his son-in-law, Abraham, who remember hired a lawyer to beat him up, has died unexpectedly, and now resides in hell with the Freemasons, lawyers, and priests. He concludes by singing praises with all friends of mankind, touting his own greatness, and predicting that Abraham's death would lead to the end of all wars. Amen and amen. Man, if only we'd informed Hitler that the son-in-law of Timothy Dexter was burning in hell, maybe we could have avoided that whole mess. Then there's this amusing bit where Dexter alleges he can play a mouth harp so well that he would drool excessively, and it would make women similarly wet. I regret to inform you that we as a society have been ripped off. Alpha male grifters sold us lies about energy and refinement and the wolf within, when all we needed for female attraction was the mouth harp. Ladies. I'll give you a moment to wipe down your chairs. The rest of the book becomes a lot more succinct and a lot more contemplative. Dexter promises to make as much heaven on earth as possible and then die in peace. He once again bemoans how Abraham made his life a living hell. He alleges writing this book was so moving and difficult for him that he cried like a baby. But what's worse is the birds that chip often before he can get to sleep. The noise is so great. All hell. Even back then, the birds were government drones sent to sabotage the greatest minds of the time. He insists that all his philosophical musings were divinely revealed to him, including the sacred forbidden truth of how the world was made. It came from nothing over 6 days. Undoubtedly, he came across this obscure theory no one talks about in a cryptic text no one talks about. And finally, a bunch of self-serving commendations that Timothy Dexter paid a poet named Jonathan Plummer to write. And that was a pickle for the knowing ones. Definitely one of the most baffling and nonsensical pieces of literature I've ever seen. At least I could somewhat read Artemis Blue, but it's also a snapshot of a different time and a different way of thinking. It's not that Timothy Dexter is a smart or exciting writer. It's the juxtaposition between the insanity and the brief flashes of humor and unironic brilliance that make this book special. I'm no colonial linguistics scholar, so I had to do some research to try and decipher the prose, but I hope I was somewhat accurate and respectful in conveying it. Feel free to correct me in the comments if necessary. The manuscript's 32 pages long and free to read online. If you want to skim it for the lulz, that's fine, but if you want to actually try and read it and understand it, bring some ibuprofen, some outside resources, and a whole lot of patience. It really is that far removed from readability. In conclusion, I think we can turn back to our seminal quote. Truly, we ne'er shall look upon his like again. Take care, everyone. See you all next time.